Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt up north today, joined by my governor, Governor Glenn Youngkin, who's the governor of the great state of Virginia. Governor, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, Hugh. Good morning. I sure hope we get you back home soon.
Well, I go back and forth. I was here last week. Governor, I want to start with a question from way out of left field. I know you're not running for president, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are you familiar with the Uyghurs and what China has done?
Yeah, Hugh, it is a horrific violation of everything we believe about human dignity. And this is why when we see a president who is truly acquiescing to every China whim, we have to stand up and say, what are we doing? We know the Chinese are trying to dominate the world, and they are repressing their own population in the process of it. I mean, this is what China is. It's the Chinese Communist Party ruling with an iron fist. They're using every single arrow in their quiver, economic, militarily, surveillance, and repression of their own population in order to achieve their goals. And we have got to get tough. We got to understand that it is at America's expense, but we also have to recognize what they're doing to their own population. This is a horrific window into what the Chinese Communist Party is all about.
Well, Governor, I went down to hear Nikki Haley in New Hampshire yesterday, and she spent a lot of time talking about the Uyghurs and about Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party. Do you think if the Republican is going to run for president, should they just make China front and center?
Well, I think that there are a number of key topics here that I think are going to define America's future. One is how we combat China aggression, and we have got to combat it. Let's just be clear. There are economic challenges that we have to rise to, where we have particular sectors like semiconductors and like the supply chains in the EVs and everything else that we have allowed China to dominate. I mean, the critical minerals world is one that that President Biden keeps driving us deeper and deeper into submission and to Chinese dominance. We have got to get on this. But on top of that, our allies need to know that we're going to stand strong. I had the great opportunity to visit Taiwan, Japan, and Korea. I had a chance to meet with both political leaders and business leaders. They need to know that America is going to be there. And this is such an important part of the future of America's role, which is for freedom and democracy. And China
Governor,
stands for the exact opposite.
I'm going to come to culture issues in a second, but I want to stay on China. One more question. 2 days ago, Robert O'Brien, the former National Security Advisor, Ambassador O'Brien, sent me a story that the Chinese Communist Party or their companies that work for them have bought 380,000 acres of American land. Some of that, no doubt, in Virginia. What do you think about that? And ought states and the federal government to condemn that land and get it back? Because I don't think the Chinese communists ought to own land in the United States.
Well, Hugh, we passed a bill. I championed it, and we passed it in the Virginia General Assembly that forbids the Chinese Communist Party from acquiring farmland in Virginia. And you know that we have some of the most sensitive national assets that we must protect, and we got out in front of this. And I think if you're going to close the barn door after the horse has already gotten out, we're lost. And so we first need to prohibit this across the nation. And second of all, we need to go back and look at these purchases and figure out where they are. And if they need to be unwound, they should be unwound. I mean, listen, we've got the Pentagon. We've got Quantico, the largest naval base in the world, Wallops Island, where we're launching rockets, plus a lot of the national security infrastructure in Virginia. We are not going to allow the Chinese Communist Party to buy land adjacent to it where they can set up surveillance networks like they've done in Cuba. This is absolutely common sense, and we got to get moving. And again, there's no sense trying to close the barn door after the horse is out. Let's get it shut before the horses run away from us.
You know, Governor, I know about Quantico, and I know about the largest base down in Norfolk, Virginia Beach. I don't know about the other ones, but I don't need to know. I just need you to know and to make sure that the Chinese are not buying the land around it. Governor, in a few hours, we may learn the fate of Harvard's admissions, and through that, the fate of every admission, including the University of Virginia. It is unconstitutional for a state institution to use race in the admission of people. There have been a minor exception. The door is going to close on that today. What do you think the court ought to do with the Harvard case today, if you're familiar with it?
Well, first of all, let me begin. I am always hesitant to jump out in front of our Supreme Court. I believe we have an extraordinary slate of conservative justices that are doing an extremely good job. And I believe that they will rule that in the best interest of America, and that is going to be to recognize that college admissions need to be about excellence. And as colleges build classes, they have to take all kinds of things into consideration. But one of the things that I have felt so strongly about is we've seen the pursuit of equity, in fact, undermine excellence. And we've seen it in our high schools. We've seen it in colleges. And this is just a moment for us to all step back and recognize that we have to raise the bar. And we can raise the ceiling and the floor at the same time. It's what we're doing in our public schools in Virginia. We, in fact, are going to put back high standards for proficiency in our public schools in Virginia. But we're also working to support those areas of Virginia that have perennially underperformed and making sure that we're bringing more resources there. This is about opportunity, and we should provide opportunity paths for all Virginians and all Americans. But to mandate that we're going to lower expectations is really not keeping with America. And so, again, it's about opportunity and creating opportunity paths, not mandating equity.
Virginia has a lot of great universities. And of course, the star in the universe is the University of Virginia. I was talking to a New Hampshire woman yesterday who had 5 sons. They went to 5 different colleges. One of them is a Cavalier, a University of Virginia person. And I thought to myself, that's great. Americans ought to be able to go wherever they can get in, but they ought to be able to get in without someone putting their thumb on the scale. What has Virginia done to make sure that we do not have thumbs on scales, keeping Asian Americans especially out of our very best universities because we have, quote, too many of them, close quote, which is an evil idea, but it's gotten into the water?
Yeah, well, Hugh, let me just first begin with I love all of our public universities in Virginia, and they're all stars. And one of the, I think, great attributes of the Commonwealth is just the extraordinary college and university system that we have. That includes the University of Virginia. And I think one of the real benefits of being in Virginia is access to all of these great universities. We've been fighting this battle on excellence in admissions, yes, all the way through to our governor's schools. And Hugh, that there's been a battle over the Thomas Jefferson School for Science and Technology and the admissions policies there, which mimic this exact same discussion. And so we passed a law last year that basically said it's going to be a merit-based admissions policy, that it is not going to racially discriminate. And on top of that, then we added into our middle school curriculum support for students who would aspire to go to our governor's schools. And again, I think so often the left liberal progressives try to turn this into an or moment, and we need to turn it into an and. We should have merit-based admissions, and students who aspire for these schools should have excellent public education and support systems to get them prepared. This is not a moment where, again, we should be watering down what excellence stands for. We should be preparing all students for it.
Governor, last question on that. The classical learning test is being adopted increasingly by schools that have abandoned SATs and ACTs. They're not sure about the test. They're not sure about the bias. What do you think about the classical learning test? Do you think that Virginia will take a hard look at allowing that to be a metric by which ability is measured?
Well, Hugh, it is something that we are investigating. But to be clear, we have 2 testing regimens that are applied in Virginia: the standards of learning, and of course the national scorecard, the NAEP tests. And of course, what we have seen is that Virginia, during the previous eight years of Democratic leadership, watered down the standards that were defining proficiency. And as a result, the SOL scores, standard learning scores, went up, and yet the national report card scores went down. And that's the honesty gap that we are closing in Virginia by reestablishing high standards of proficiency, excellence, and we're going to stretch our students. This is critical. And then finally, we are tackling this entire notion that we have to celebrate excellence. This past year in Fairfax County, there was a clear effort to not notify students when they had achieved accolades on the national merit tests. And we went at it. Our attorney general's in the middle of an investigation. This is just a systemic effort to try to undermine excellence. And so alternative testing approaches, clear transparency on what the tests that we are applying mean, and trying to set standards that in fact stretch our students. We've got control of our State Board of Education with appointees that I've been able to make, and we are righting the ship here. But this is an overall recognition that there has been a effort. This has not been a mistake. This has been purposeful to water down expectations around the nation on testing requirements, so that the underperformance of schools and the effort to teach children politics as opposed to the critical areas of math and science and reading has truly undermined America's future competitiveness.
Let me close, Governor, by talking with you about a question that Ambassador Haley got in a New Hampshire town hall yesterday, moderated by Morgan Ortegas from Polaris National Security. And she said, and it solicited applause, which is always something to notice if you're in the audience, that we have to stop hating American history and we have to teach the greatness. Now, in Virginia, of course, there's a lot of history, both Revolutionary and Civil War. And we know the flaws of our founders, even George Washington, maybe the greatest man ever, Lincoln probably greater, but they started and they saved our country. But Jefferson and George Mason and everyone, many of them enslaved people. James Madison enslaved people. We know that, but we have to stop hating on our country. What do you think of the ambassador's answer, and do you adopt the same kind of approach?
Well, I applaud that answer, and in fact, we have just overhauled our history standards in Virginia, and it was one of our first initiatives around curricula and standards where we first reintroduced learning all about our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and our Declaration of Independence. It's all about understanding the founding of our nation. We expanded the history that we cover, the good and the bad. And we can't know where we're going unless we know where we have come from. But the reality is that this was a nation that was founded by men. There has not been one perfect person on this planet other than, in my faith, our Lord. And therefore, there have been material violations of all things we hold dear. And yet we are a nation in pursuit of excellence. And we have to get on that boat. And that's why in Virginia we overhauled our standards. I am so pleased with where we landed. We will have the best in the nation. We will teach about our history, all of it.
Well done, Governor. I'm still waiting for my appointment as Sirdar of the Shenandoah to come through. But other than that, you're doing great. Keep it up. Have a great 4th of July, Governor.